In the suffocating heat of the desert noon, Lila's scanner beeped frantically, a warning of something big, unusually big nearby. As she crept closer to the source, the sands shifted ominously under her feet. Before she could react, a massive shadow loomed overhead, casting her in sudden, chilling darkness. Looking up, she saw the enormous, glinting scales of Krasath, the desert's most feared predator, towering over her. Instead of the expected roar, the creature simply stared, its penetrating eyes reflecting a curious, almost gentle, intelligence. The sun blazed mercilessly over the vast, undulating dunes of Zephyria, a desolate desert that stretched across the landscape like a golden ocean. Its sands, ever shifting and treacherous, whispered secrets of a millennia-old legend, tales of a beast both feared and revered. Lila, her goggles coated with dust and a scarf wrapped tightly around her mouth, trudged through the coarse sand. Her father, a renowned xenobiologist, had filled her childhood with stories of alien creatures, but none so captivating as the one reputed to haunt these forsaken plains. Today, driven by a mix of youthful audacity and scientific curiosity, she sought the truth behind the myths. As the afternoon waned, the desert's deceptive calm was shattered by a sudden, deep rumbling that vibrated through the soles of her boots. Lila paused, her heart pounding, as a massive shadow materialized through the swirling sandstorm ahead. She tightened her grip on the digital recorder slung around her neck, her finger poised over the record button. Emerging from the sand like a behemoth from ancient lore, Krasath stood before her. His scales shimmered with an iridescent sheen, reflecting the dying sunlight in flashes of copper and jade. Towering 4 times her height, the creature's eyes glowed a deep, sorrowful blue, a stark contrast to the ferocious tales recounted by those who supposedly encountered him. Lila stood her ground, her breath caught in her throat, as Krasath tilted his massive head, eyeing her with an expression that mirrored curiosity rather than the hostility she had been warned about. "I mean you no harm," she called out, her voice muffled by the scarf but clear enough in the silent expanse. "I've come to learn, not to conquer." Krasath's response came not in words but in a low, harmonic growl that resonated through the air, vibrating against her chest in an almost soothing pattern. His large, taloned paw shifted closer, dislodging a cascade of sand, yet he made no move to attack. Summoning her courage, Lila took a tentative step forward, her recorder extended. "My name is Lila," she continued, her voice steadier. "I want to understand you, to share your story with those who fear you." The creature's snout lowered to the ground, his enormous eyes narrowing as he inspected her. After a moment that stretched like eternity, he exhaled sharply, sending a small storm of sand swirling around them. It was a gesture that Lila interpreted as resignation, perhaps even acceptance. Krasath then turned, his heavy tail creating a sinuous path in the sand as he began to walk away slowly. Lila followed, keeping a respectful distance. As they moved side by side, a strange sense of companionship began to form, bridging the gap between human and alien, between myth and reality. Her recorder hummed quietly, capturing every moment of their groundbreaking interaction, ready to challenge the galaxy's perceptions one note at a time. Over the next several days, beneath the harsh, unwavering glare of the Zephyrian sun, Lila returned each morning to where the dunes met jagged rocks, carrying not only provisions but a burgeoning sense of purpose. Krasath was always there before her, his massive form emerging from the heat mirages as if conjured by the desert itself. Their encounters began with cautious exchanges. Lila observed and meticulously recorded Krasath's habits and behaviors on her tablet. The creature seemed intrigued by her devices, tilting his head sideways whenever she played back recordings of his vocalizations. One morning, Lila ventured closer than ever before. She held out a device that projected holographic images of Earth's flora and fauna. "See, these are from my world," she explained, her voice a gentle murmur against the whispering winds. Krasath's eyes widened at the moving pictures, a low purr rumbling from his throat as the images of blue oceans and green forests flickered through the air. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. During one of Lila's visits, a sudden sandstorm swept across the plains. As the winds howled and sand whipped against her skin, Krasath curled his massive body around her, shielding her from the storm with his hulking form. Lila, huddled against him, felt the vibrations of his protective growls blend with the storm's fury. As the storm abated, leaving a quiet cocoon of calm, Lila leaned back against Krasath's warm scales. "Thank you," she murmured, reaching out to touch his rough hide. "You saved me." Krasath nuzzled his snout against her shoulder in response, his breath warm and surprisingly sweet. It was a gesture so tender and uncharacteristic of the fearsome beast of legends that Lila felt her eyes dampen with emotion. Their sessions grew longer and more frequent. Lila taught Krasath simple human gestures, like nodding for yes and shaking his head for no. In return, Krasath attempted to mimic her sounds, his deep, resonant tones shaping the soft vowels and sharp consonants of her language. "You're learning quickly," Lila praised during one lesson, laughter in her voice as Krasath managed a rough approximation of her name. "Soon you'll be speaking better than me." Krasath's attempt at a laugh, a sort of bellowing chuckle, echoed across the dunes, drawing a flock of small, winged desert creatures that hovered curiously around them. Their bond, forged in curiosity and nurtured through shared experiences, deepened into something profound. Lila found herself looking forward to these meetings not just as a scientist, but as a friend. Krasath, in turn, showed signs of anticipation, often waiting at their meeting spot long before Lila arrived. One evening, as the sun set in a spectacular display of oranges and purples, Lila sat sketching Krasath's majestic profile. "I wish others could see you as I do," she said softly. "Not as a monster, but as a friend." Krasath leaned over to look at her drawing, his breath causing the pages to flutter. He snorted softly, a sound Lila had come to recognize as his chuckle. As night fell and the first stars began to twinkle in the vast desert sky, Lila packed up her belongings. "See you tomorrow, my friend," she called out as she started back towards her camp, unaware that the coming days would challenge everything she thought she knew about trust and friendship in the face of looming danger. Lila's days began to follow a new rhythm, dictated by the sun's relentless march across the desert sky and her meetings with Krasath. However, the tranquility of their encounters was about to be shattered by the arrival of unwelcome visitors to Zephyria. On what started as a typical sun-drenched morning, Lila noticed unusual tracks near their usual meeting spot, boot prints, far too orderly and numerous to belong to any native wanderers. A chill ran down her spine as she followed the trail, the implications slowly dawning on her. Approaching a shallow ridge, the sound of voices carried over the wind. Concealing herself behind a large boulder, she peered down at a group of heavily armed individuals. Their leader, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, pointed animatedly at a holographic map. "We've tracked the beast to this region," he was saying. "Legends say it's a monster, but I say it's a prize. Think of the credits it'll fetch on the black market." Lila's heart pounded in her chest as she recorded their conversation, the gravity of the situation sinking in. These were hunters, and Krasath was their intended target. She rushed back to warn Krasath, her feet barely touching the scorching sand. Upon reaching their meeting place, she saw Krasath's imposing form waiting, a sense of unease palpable in his stance. "Krasath, we need to leave." "Now," she gasped, breathless. "Hunters, they're close and they're coming for you." Krasath's rumble was low and uneasy, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. Lila grabbed a handful of sand, letting it sift through her fingers as she thought rapidly. "We can hide you. Maybe in the caves to the north," she suggested, but Krasath shook his massive head, the ground vibrating under his displeasure. "No, we face," he uttered, his attempt at speech rough but determined. Lila looked up at him, her resolve hardening at his courageous stance. Before she could reply, a drone buzzed overhead, its cameras undoubtedly relaying their position back to the hunters. Krasath roared, a sound that shook the desert, as Lila ducked for cover. "There's no time to hide," she said urgently. "Follow me, I know a place." They moved quickly, Lila leading Krasath through a series of narrow canyons, the walls echoing with the sounds of their desperate flight. They reached a secluded gully, the rocks providing a momentary respite. Lila checked her communicator, her father's voice crackling through urgently. Lila, get out of there. I've alerted the authorities, but they may not arrive in time. I'm with Krasath, she replied, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. I won't leave him. As they waited, hidden by the shadow of the towering rock formations, the distant sounds of the hunting party grew louder. Krasath's breathing was deep and measured, his eyes reflecting fierce determination. If they come, we fight together, Lila said, meeting his gaze. Krasath nodded, the bond between them now a silent pact of mutual protection. But as the echoes of the hunters approached, Lila couldn't help but wonder if their newfound alliance would be enough to withstand the storm that was about to descend upon them. Dusk settled over the desert, casting long shadows that merged with the darkness of the approaching night. Lila and Krasath remained concealed in the gully, the silence between them heavy with anticipation. The faint murmur of voices and the crunch of boots on sand signaled the hunter's approach. Lila's grip tightened on a small handheld device, her last line of defense designed to emit a high-frequency sound that might momentarily disorient the humans. They're here, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Krasath's eyes glinted in the twilight, the deep blue orbs now swirling with a turbulent storm of emotions. He nodded, understanding the gravity of the impending confrontation. The hunter's leader, the man with the scar, stepped into view at the edge of the gully. Come out, beast! We know you're here. And we know you've got company, he called out, his voice echoing against the stone walls. Lila peered over the edge, her heart pounding. She could see 6 of them, each armed and scanning the shadows. Taking a deep breath, she stood and stepped into view, her hands raised. I'm here! But he's not what you think. He's not a monster, she shouted down to them. The leader sneered. That's not for you to decide, girl. You think we'd travel all this way for a myth? No, we came for a creature that'll make us rich. Krasath rose to his full height behind Lila, his presence immense. He let out a low, menacing growl, the sound resonating like thunder. Sand cascaded down the slopes of the gully as he moved closer to Lila, his protective instincts fully awakened. Leave now, and I won't harm you, Krasath's voice boomed, startling the hunters with its clarity and depth. His command of human speech was rough but understandable, a testament to his intelligence and the bond he shared with Lila. The hunters hesitated, their confidence wavering at the sight of the towering alien whose legendary ferocity was no longer just a story. But greed edged out fear. The leader raised his weapon. Take them down! As the first shot rang out, Lila activated her device. A piercing sound filled the air, disorienting the hunters and giving Krasath the moment he needed. With a powerful sweep of his tail, he knocked 2 hunters off their feet, sending them sprawling into the sand. Lila ducked as Krasath moved with surprising speed, his every move calculated and deliberate. He incapacitated another hunter with a gentle but firm push, avoiding lethal force out of respect for Lila's wishes. The leader, recovering from the confusion, aimed his weapon again at Krasath. Before he could fire, Lila tackled him, knocking the gun away. They struggled on the ground, her determination fueled by fear for her friend. Krasath watched for a moment, ensuring Lila could handle herself, before turning his attention back to the remaining hunters. Go. This is your last chance, he warned, his voice a deep rumble that shook the ground. Defeated and frightened, the hunters retreated, helping their injured companions as they fled. Lila stood, breathing heavily, and looked up at Krasath. He bent down, his large eye level with hers, an expression of gratitude and respect evident in his gaze. You spoke, she said, a small smile breaking through the tension. For you, I found my voice, Krasath replied, his tone gentle and warm. As they watched the hunters disappear into the night, Lila and Krasath knew their bond had been sealed in trust and bravery. A connection that transcended species, born in the heart of the Zephyrien desert. In the tranquil aftermath of their confrontation, Lila and Krasath found solace in the stillness of the Zephyrian night. Stars pierced the dark canvas above, their light soft and steady, a stark contrast to the evening's chaos. They sat in silence, the earlier adrenaline slowly ebbing away, replaced by a deep, comforting calm. You spoke, Krasath. Not just to protect yourself, but to protect me, Lila said, her voice tinged with awe and gratitude. She leaned against his massive side, feeling the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. Krasath turned his head slightly, his eyes reflecting the starlight. Lila, in your voice I heard home. I could not let harm come to that. His voice was deep, resonant, and carried the subtle vibrations of the desert wind. Lila smiled, pulling out her digital recorder to capture his words. We need to tell your story, Krasath. The galaxy needs to understand who you really are. Krasath rumbled in agreement, the sound rolling softly across the sand. And they shall. We write it together, you and I. Over the next few days, Lila crafted their story. She documented every detail of their encounters, from the first fearful meeting to the final, fierce confrontation with the hunters. Krasath contributed too, his perspective offering poignant insights into his life as a misunderstood creature, feared by many but known truly by one. Lila uploaded the story to her blog, broadcasting it across the interstellar network. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages poured in from researchers, activists, and even former skeptics, each one echoing newfound respect and fascination for Krasath. Look at this, Krasath, Lila exclaimed one morning, reading from her screen. They want to declare this area a protected reserve. They want to study and preserve your species. Krasath's low purr vibrated through the ground. Your words carry power, Lila. More than my roars ever could. As the sun crested the horizon one clear morning, Lila and Krasath climbed to the top of a high dune to watch the dawn. The desert below them stretched vast and beautiful, untouched and serene. We've started something amazing, haven't we? Lila mused, her eyes scanning the horizon. Yes, a dialogue, Krasath replied, between your kind and mine. Lila nodded, her hand resting lightly on her recorder. A dialogue that began with fear but leads to understanding. May it continue to grow. They sat together in silence, watching as the sun painted the sky with strokes of orange and pink. The desert around them awakened, alive with the sounds of distant creatures starting their day. It was a world coming to terms with the existence of a being like Krasath, a world ready to learn and adapt. Whatever comes next, Lila said, turning to look up at Krasath, we face it together. You're not alone anymore. And neither am I. Krasath lowered his head, touching his forehead gently to hers in a gesture of deep connection and mutual respect. Yes, together, he agreed, his voice a soft echo in the morning light. As they descended the dune, their shadows long on the sand, Lila felt a profound sense of purpose. Together with Krasath, she would continue to bridge the gap between the unknown and the known, between fear and friendship, one story at a time.